Well, there's nothing worse than watching a bunch of rank-and-file Nazis march up and push aside a person of color with the American flag so they can commit atrocities on minorities. Ah, no, wait. That's Antifa marching up to and pushing aside a person of color with the American flag so they can brutally and beat up people trying to preserve free speech. Seriously though, look at that image. Picture says 1,000 words, and this picture displays fully who the real enemies of American politics are. It's like the Nuremberg marches of 1934, that or an ISIS gathering. Thus started the already infamous Battle of Berkeley. Despite what BuzzFeed or CNN or BBC may have reported, this carnage rests entirely on the far left shoulder. I abhor violence to meet political ends, but I don't condemn the people on the right who drove out Antifa on that day for a number of reasons. First off, Antifa and associated groups like BAM are domestic terrorist groups, plain and simple. They will do anything to shut down events and people whom they deem an enemy. Violence against anyone by any method. And that enemies list has rapidly expanded in the months since Donald Trump was elected president. There's this weird myth that Antifa and other far-left groups firmly believe, which is that there's this massive army of Nazis and racists and Klansmen that were just in hiding until Trump unleashed them on America like the Golden Horde. To them, if they can fight and terrorize these racists now before they have power, they can prevent Holocaust 2, Holocaust with a vengeance. And they saw the free speech event as a mass gathering of these future SS officers. There's just one little problem. It's all a big lie. When combined the memberships of neo-Nazi, KKK, and other extreme white supremacy groups, there might be 10,000 in the whole country. Even if I double that, just to include non-violent racists, we're talking 0.006% of America. Not really an epidemic here, guys. Oh, and as for those awful Nazis meeting at the free speech event, yeah, it turns out there was a grand total of 4 Nazis. 4. And they were disavowed by the other members of the event, which included gays, blacks, Latinos, and liberals among their ranks. Not quite the triumph of the will meeting you expected. And hey, Antifa, you know a great way to create more white nationalists? Beat up white people for being white. Turns out committing violence on fascists when they're not is a good way of radicalizing them. You literally do the opposite of your goal. But it wasn't even your negative rise of white nationalism. You guys took violence to terrorism levels, attacking innocent people and their property. I would never condone punching a Nazi, but that's your whole shtick, and it's apparently you're all too ignorant and bigoted to understand the difference. Let me tell you what is not punching a Nazi. Beating people in the back of the head with metal poles because they wore a Make America Great Again hat. Ganging up on, dragging away, and beating lone men, sometimes after they're unconscious. Attacking a Syrian man with pepper spray and a wooden pole for, quote, looking like a Nazi. Macing girls in the face for the sin of wearing a Make Bitcoin Great Again hat. No! Violently beating women with poles while trapped in metal barricades, and violently assaulting the elderly for being Trump supporters. In fact, it seems to be the only time you guys feel comfortable beating on a Nazi is when the odds are heavily in your favor, i.e., when you highly outnumber them, or they're not fighting-age men. Adding to the disgrace of your fighting tactics, it's your predilection of putting women in the front lines to get beaten up, and shouting sexism when it occurs. This is actually a tactic from the ISIS, Hamas, Islamic terrorist playbook. They purposely put innocent women and children in harm's way so you can claim to be innocent when inevitably they are hit in the crossfire. Which explains why a 5'1", 98-pound porn star is trying to bring home Nazi scalps and becomes a symbol of sexism when she's inevitably clocked in the face and removed from the fight crying. You have no respect for women. Don't claim to suddenly care. I found it especially ironic when an Antifa group took to Twitter after the battle to proclaim that violence in the aim of political goals is terrorism. You guys revived that spirit in American politics, and now you want to hide behind that in self-defense? You really have no shame, which is why no one will respect you. Ever. But it's not just that Antifa is a disgusting, disrespectful, hypocritical terrorist group that is a stain on American politics. The Battle of Berkeley and its defeat to Antifa rests entirely on their weak, scrawny, muscleless backs. For the past 6 months, America, and especially the right, has had to be faced with your terror. We try to engage in the political dialogue with actual politics and discussion, hence why many elected Donald Trump. But through these following events since the election, the right attempted to meet the left with dialogue and politics, and were instead met with violence and terror. The election of Donald Trump and the subsequent days of terror after his election, the banning of Ben Shapiro at DePaul, the Deplorable riots, the inauguration riots, the Women's March, the Seattle Mile Yiannopoulos talk, the Berkeley Mile Yiannopoulos talk, the NYC Gavin McInnes talk, the March for Trump, the Huntington Beach March, the Charles Murray talk at Middleton, the shutdown of Heather McDonald's talk at Claremont McKenna College, the shutdown of Jordan Peterson's talk at McMaster University. For many on the right, the time for discussion was over at events like these, and for their planned event for free speech, they were not wrong to assume that this would be no different. The writing was on the wall, literally. Antifa had scheduled a block party and barbecue, coincidentally at the same time and place as the free speech event. Word unsurprisingly went around to both sides that they were planning to shut down the neo-fash events by any means necessary, which, of course, means terror. So, no, I don't blame the Trump supporters for getting ready to defend and face an Antifa that clearly was intending to use violence. Peaceful discourse had long left the lexicon of the far left, and trying to use logic usually got you a sucker punch or maced. Adding on to this is the fact that Trump supporters were DR'd by police, while Antifa, who surrounded the free speech supporters, were not. It appeared to many that to stop Antifa, only defending yourself could work, especially since it worked when attempted before. Gavin McInnes's Proud Boys successfully drove off Antifa after they maced him in New York City. Kyle Chapman defended those being beaten and entered the halls of glory during the March for Trump. In Huntington Beach, Trump supporters finally fought back when attacked and managed to drive off an admittedly paltry Antifa presence there. So finally a full battle occurred as Antifa struck free speech supporters, throwing rocks, bricks, and firecrackers, sometimes on wine bottles. Despite the disadvantages of arms and numbers, the free speech group successfully routed Antifa as they self-admittedly began a stampede to avoid getting beat up, shoving down their own as they ran. At the present moment, it's a major victory for free speech. It showed that Americans wouldn't kowtow to the violence and terror of the far left in the way that much of Western Europe has. That being said, I don't believe our future with the far left bodes well. Antifa's already disliked and disavowed by many, so this huge defeat at Berkeley is probably a big problem for their movement. Most likely, Antifa will either begin to fade into obscurity with smaller and smaller attempts at disruption being rebuked, or what I believe is more likely, they'll ramp up their activities and tactics in order to get success and forward momentum. I mean, Antifa's already struck again. This time it's in Auburn to shut down a Richard Spencer talk, and they surprisingly initially failed in pushing violence on his supporters. But the baton was picked up by the Auburn students who created utter chaos in the city. Look, I don't like Richard Spencer. I don't like what he believes in, I don't like what he says, I don't think he has any supporters, no matter how small. But the image of mobs of students in Antifa hunting down supporters street by street is troubling to me. Because when the goalpost for unacceptable people moves farther center, and trust me, it will, it won't just be far-right white nationalists being chased by angry mobs, who appear to be including more and more of the left. Finally, if we no longer can talk to people on the other side of the aisle, if we only argue with our fists, we'll begin to lose our freedoms. Each side will seek someone powerful who can use the government to submit the other side, and in turn they'll revoke our liberties to achieve it. This is still admittedly a faraway image, and for most of us right now we can still talk to each other and discuss ideas, but it's increasingly becoming more difficult to do that. It's why I wanted to make this channel, so we could actually understand and be able to discuss ideas with each other, rather than shout or swing fists at each other. So Antifa, stop this senseless violence. It will lead us all down a road that you will not want when it comes. And until you stop, expect the right to defend themselves and beat you with force, and the moral high ground as well. I'm Ben Sano, the elephant in the room, and I hope you enjoyed this. Stay tuned for more content, and like and subscribe if you enjoyed.